I have to admit that, even though now today everyone obviously is talking about stable coins, right? I think I was recently at a birthday party of one of my TradFi friends, and nobody was in crypto, and everyone there was talking about stable coins as well, right? After the Circle IPO, there's obviously like a lot of excitement, but stable coins have been around for a long time. And I actually only really joined crypto, as mentioned, in 2020. Stable coins were already around. We've already been doing a lot of things in stable coins. Myself and a lot of my friends, we've already been sort of like, I wouldn't say living, but we already sent each other stablecoin payments, etc., for a very long time. But I think still I was not aware of how transforming stablecoins really were, until I would say relatively recently, when I realized the sheer sort of like impact that stablecoins actually have on a lot of people, right? So I was recently talking to. So I actually I did an exchange semester in Brazil doing my undergrad studies, and obviously Brazil is a great place, but one of the not as good things of Brazil is it has a weak currency, right? The currency depreciated
Real.
quite
Yeah.
significantly against the US dollar over the past years. And when I talked to my friend from back in the days in Brazil, I realized that basically, while here maybe I live in Hong Kong, crypto is still something for people who are slightly more crypto passionate. In Brazil and other emerging countries like Argentina, all over Africa, it's really part of everyday life. So, himself, all of his friends, they're not crypto natives, they don't work in the industry, but they're all utilizing already, sort of like fintechs that run on crypto rails. They're already saving, utilizing stable coins. They deposit their money into stable coin yield products like T-bills. They're accessing other yield products already. They're like all the businesses have incorporated, or a lot of the business have incorporated stable coins into their sort of like payment processes. So, companies that are sending money all over the world. So you kind of realize that crypto is really becoming mainstream, which is something, again, that I'm very excited about, because for the longest period of time, it felt a little bit like we built all these amazing innovations, but at the end of the day, there wasn't anyone really to use them except for, the insiders, the usual sort of like crypto native yield funds that were sort of like looping those tokens on the usual protocols. So that's been a big eye opener for me, and I think that's the thing that makes me currently the most excited. And I'm based here in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has just passed the stablecoin bill as well. Hong Kong has just, or they just announced, or CMA announced, that there's going to be the CNH, so Chinese currency stablecoin, coming as well. And also there, right? I the other day I talked to the CEO of one of the largest, payment companies, cross-border payment companies, and basically they're saying that, and this is a massive unlock, and they expect that all of their transactions are going to move on to stablecoin rails. So I think we're really right now at the point where adoption is accelerating very, very quickly. And being in the RWA space for a few years, I feel more has happened in the last 6 months than in the previous 5 years that I was involved. And I think you were involved even longer. So curious to hear what you think. But overall, very excited about those developments.
It started off really about 2013, 2014 with Tether, right? Actually acting as the settlement layer between the different crypto exchanges. Why? Because you couldn't off-ramp and on-ramp to do settlement between the exchanges, and especially if you wanted to move currencies back and forth. And so Tether became the currency to move back and forth. Then in DeFi, Circle came about with their USDC, together with Coinbase, or Base, Coinbase at the time. And that was really interesting. And I was really heavily focused at Bitcoin.com. We were driving payments, right? We were looking at Bitcoin as the peer-to-peer electronic cash, where you could do payments and settlements. And at the time, there was no alternative, right? I mean, Tether was really just between the exchanges. It was only crypto people. And so Bitcoin was ultimately the currency. And before Bitcoin, the blockchain became clogged with all of these transactions, it was an open, freely traded exchange where you could settle really quickly and you could settle at basically no cost. And so it's a really attractive proposition if you're a merchant. You have to pay 5 to 7% in fees to the credit card companies, to the POS vendor, the point of sale vendor that was selling you this equipment that was actually allowing you to do the transaction and connecting to the banking infrastructure. So you had some 10 to 12 participants, a gateway, sort of toll takers across a settlement of a transaction. Wow, how inefficient was that, as you were talking about? And Bitcoin was good because you had instant settlement, it was transparent, you got the money right away, you didn't need to wait 30 days, and you didn't have those 12 toll takers along the way. But one thing that did change was all of a sudden Bitcoin had shifted to being too slow, being too expensive. The transactions were up to $100 at one point, and ultimately it became and shifted from being oil to, or payments or money, to becoming an asset, right? So all of a sudden it became gold, the digital gold. And so stablecoins were essential. Now, with this new regulatory framework where all of a sudden stablecoins are becoming, something that people can recognize, they acknowledge, it becomes a really interesting proposition for any merchant. It's really going to change the game in terms of, I don't need a credit card anymore. I just need to be able to read a QR code. And I think in Asia, you have a huge advantage where everybody is extremely familiar with QR codes and paying via QR codes. They do that all through their instant messenger apps already, WeChat, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting with your background in payments, in fintech. Where do you see this whole payments market going, right? Especially if stablecoins goes from I think I wrote a piece back in January where with the Genius Act, this is going to go to a $2 trillion industry in the next 1.5 years.
I think generally, right, it is definitely ironic that an industry that set out to sort of like completely reinvent money as a concept, ended up having the biggest product market ended up being the dollar on chain, right? But regardless of that, yes, I 100% agree. Stable coins are actually really transformative. And I talk out of experience, as mentioned, right? Because the thing with, like, if you look at neobanks, right? Like, what do neobanks do? Neobanks actually they still utilize traditional rails, right? They still utilize traditional rails, like concept called open banking and other sort of like banking as a service companies, and then they mainly bring you a better user experience, right? A better user interface, better user experience. They cut down the fees, but they only cut down the fees because they're taking less profits, right, than the banks. But ultimately, they're still running on the same exact rails. And yes, it is an absolute nightmare, right? Like once you've been in payments, you realize this is very complicated. There's so many intermediaries, involved in, one credit card transaction. And it is actually very expensive, right? Still, on average, credit card transaction is like 2.5%. Some of the credit cards, you're talking about American Express. I mean, most small merchants don't take it, and I understand it, right? Because they're charging you an arm and a leg for every single transaction. And when it comes to cross-border payments, it is even worse, right? When it comes to like remittances, it is. Everyone always talks about the time that it takes, and obviously time is money, right? So time is money, but it's also the cost, right? Especially for foreign workers, etc. The cost it takes to send money home, back in the via Western Union, etc. So it's really an old stack that has sort of like grown into a little bit of a Frankenstein, I guess, with all the different countries and all the different sort of like networks and stable coins. The concept of sort of like instant settlement without any intermediaries, even though it seems like a very simple concept, it is extremely powerful. And yes, so the payments is kind of like the first big use case, right? That everyone understands.